Have you ever answered your phone at an hour when you probably shouldn't have, only to find that single moment reshaping everything you thought you understood about your past? That's exactly what happened to me one Thursday evening at 11:28 p.m., when my bedroom was dark except for the glow of my screen, showing a name I never expected to see again, Marcus, my former husband. Something pulled me to answer, maybe curiosity, maybe fate. What unfolded over the following weeks became one of the most surprising chapters of my life. But before I tell you how it all happened, I'd love to know, where in the world are you right now? This is the kind of story you'll want to share with someone later. Let me take you back to that Thursday night. I was sitting cross-legged on my couch, pretending to read an article about organizing closets while my mind wandered elsewhere. An old sitcom played softly in the background, just noise to fill the empty apartment. My dog, Pepper, was sprawled across the cushions beside me, lost in dreams. The day had been ordinary in that exhausting way where nothing terrible happens, but everything feels like too much effort. I'd changed into my worn pajamas, the comfortable ones with tiny stars printed on them, and was about to call it a night when my phone buzzed. Once, twice, a call. I glanced at the screen. Marcus, my breath caught. We'd been divorced for 4 years. 4 years without a single text, no acknowledgement on my birthday, nothing when my father passed away 2 winters ago. I watched his name pulse on the screen, the light casting shadows across my face. Then, almost without deciding to, I swiped to answer. Hello? Silence stretched between us, then a soft exhale. Hey. Just that one syllable, but I recognized everything in it. That low, hesitant tone that meant he'd been thinking about this call for hours. Marcus? I asked, though I already knew. Yeah, I wasn't certain you'd pick up. Neither was I admitted, sitting up straighter and adjusting the blanket around my shoulders. My pulse quickened. Why was he calling? Why tonight? I know it's late, he continued. I was heading home and drove past that old diner, the one where the jukebox only played country music. And somehow I couldn't stop thinking about you. I had to call. A nervous laugh escaped me. So a diner made you think of me? No, he said, and there was a crack in his voice. I called because I've missed talking to you, and I didn't have anyone else I wanted to call. There it was. That unfiltered honesty that used to both warm my heart and frustrate me endlessly. Marcus never knew how to ease into conversations. He always dove straight into the deep end. I didn't respond immediately, unsure what to say. Are you doing okay? He asked after a moment. I could have kept it simple, said I was fine, ended the call. But something stopped me. I've had better weeks, I said quietly. Something shifted in that moment, something old but recognizable, like finding a letter you wrote to yourself years ago. Maybe it was the late hour, or the unexpected vulnerability in his words. But suddenly I felt transported back to earlier times, sitting on our old apartment balcony, talking about dreams and fears until sunrise. He asked about Pepper. I told him she still refuses to learn any new tricks. He chuckled, that warm sound that seemed to brighten the entire room more than any lamp could, and then we just talked about our daughter Sarah, who's thriving in Seattle now, about how he still listens to podcasts while cooking, and how I still can't stand the taste of cilantro, about small things that shouldn't matter but somehow do. I found myself relaxing against the cushions, smiling more genuinely than I had in months. An hour disappeared. Then another. Eventually, I asked, "Why are you really calling, Marcus?" He went quiet, then answered softly, "Because my nights have been restless lately. And tonight, I just needed to hear your voice." A tear slipped down my cheek. We were never a perfect match. Far from it. But there had always been something unspoken between us, something we never fully understood or named. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was something harder to define. But in that moment, I wasn't carrying anger anymore. I wasn't holding on to bitterness. I was just present with him. We didn't discuss the divorce directly, but there were things in the pauses between our sentences that communicated more than any lawyer's papers ever had. Regret, fondness, maybe a glimpse of what might have been. The last thing he said before we hung up. "Thank you for answering. I know I didn't earn it, but I needed it." "You're welcome," I whispered. After the call ended, I stayed on the couch for a long time, phone resting against my chest. What had just happened? Why did it feel like something locked away inside me had suddenly opened? And most importantly, why had I said yes to the call, to the conversation, to feeling something again? I didn't have answers yet, but I knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The following morning, daylight filtered through my curtains earlier than I was ready for. I'd barely slept. My mind kept replaying that conversation like a scene I couldn't fast forward through. Marcus's voice, gentle, cautious, almost unfamiliar in its openness. The way he'd said he missed talking to me. The way I'd stayed on the line. I shuffled into the kitchen, tiles cool under my bare feet, and started brewing coffee. Pepper circled my ankles like nothing had changed, but everything felt different. It had been years since I'd experienced that kind of genuine connection with anyone. Not necessarily romantic, just authentic. I sat at my small kitchen table, cradling my favorite mug, the one Sarah sent me 3 Christmases ago, slightly chipped but irreplaceable. Through the window, I watched clouds drift past. Then, almost involuntarily, I picked up my phone and opened our message history, still blank. No new text from Marcus. No follow-up. Just silence. I convinced myself it had been a momentary thing. He'd had a vulnerable moment. I'd responded. That was it. But that afternoon around 3:30, my phone lit up with a message. Hope I didn't complicate things last night. Just wanted to say I'm glad we talked. I read it multiple times before responding. I'm glad too. Still processing it, but in a good way. Immediately, the typing indicator appeared. Can I call you again tonight? My heart stuttered. I didn't reply right away. I stood up, poured another coffee I didn't need, and walked through my apartment. Every corner held some memory. Some of us, some just of me alone. Why did I want this? We were finished. The past had been painful. But something about his voice the night before had felt like an echo from when things weren't broken yet. Finally, I typed, "You can call." But let's keep it simple, just talking. No expectations, absolutely. I wouldn't ask for more than that. That evening, I turned off the television early, made chamomile tea, and even lit a vanilla candle. Not for him, for me. To be intentional, to feel something deliberate again. When my phone rang at 10:45, I answered immediately. "Hey," I said. "Hey yourself," he replied, warmth flooding through the speaker. We talked for hours again. Music we'd discovered lately. Getting older. Our regrets. Books we'd loved. He told me about a dream he'd had recently, watching Sarah graduate college, and we were sitting together in the auditorium, holding hands like we'd never hurt each other. I woke up crying, he admitted. Didn't even know I still could. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply listened. And that seemed to be enough. He asked if I'd been dating anyone. I hesitated. No, I said. I tried once or twice, but it never felt right. A pause. Same here, he said. I think I had to lose everything to understand what I'd taken for granted. It stung and soothed simultaneously, like pressing on a bruise that needs attention. That call ended sometime after midnight. Sleep well, Elena, he said. And for the first time in months, I actually did. The pattern continued over the next several nights. He'd call. I'd answer. Sometimes I'd reach out first. It became familiar, comforting, and confusing all at once, because I still didn't understand what this was. About a week after that first call, Marcus said, "I've been thinking, I'd like to see you in person." I froze. Nothing intense, he added quickly. Just coffee somewhere public. No pressure. I didn't answer immediately. I just want to sit across from you again, see your face when you laugh. That's all I'm asking, I swallowed hard. Let me think about it, and I did for days. I remembered our arguments, the coldness, the silence that eventually filled every room of our house. But I also remembered how he used to leave encouraging notes stuck to the refrigerator. How he always remembered to buy my favorite tea, even when I never asked. How he held me when my father died, like the world was collapsing, but he wouldn't let me fall. This wasn't about reconciliation. That wasn't even being considered. This was about closure or curiosity, or perhaps just kindness. 2 days later, I messaged him, "Would you want to go somewhere with me this Saturday?" Nothing elaborate, just a walk somewhere we used to go. His response came quickly. I'd really like that. Every instinct told me to protect myself, to maintain the distance that time had built. But another voice, quieter, older, wiser, suggested that maybe healing doesn't always look like walls. Sometimes it looks like a walk with someone who once knew your heart. Okay, just a walk. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies. He picked me up in that same old sedan he'd driven for years. More weathered now, but the interior still smelled faintly of pine air freshener. We didn't talk much during the drive. Soft jazz played on the radio. There was something peaceful about not needing to fill every silence. He drove us to the nature preserve just outside town, a place we hadn't visited since the summer before our divorce. Back then, we were already fracturing, pretending not to notice the growing distance. Today felt different. We walked slowly along the trail. The breeze was gentle. Sunlight filtered through the trees in golden streams. I used to picture us here, he said suddenly. Years from now, gray-haired and stubborn, still debating whether to hike the long trail or the short one. I smiled. You always wanted to take the long trail. I just wanted more time with you, he said quietly. I stopped walking. He turned toward me. That's not how I remember the end, I said gently. I remember feeling like I was the only one trying. He nodded, looking down. You're right. I withdrew. I thought being distant was strength. I thought I was protecting us somehow. But I needed connection, Marcus. I needed you present. I know, he said softly. I see that now. There it was again. That vulnerability in his voice that made part of me want to comfort the man standing here. Even as I still carried scars from the husband he'd been. We found a bench overlooking a small pond. Ducks glided across the surface. A child nearby tossed breadcrumbs into the water. The wind caught my hair, sweeping it across my face. Marcus reached out instinctively and tucked it behind my ear. The gesture startled me, not because it was romantic, but because it was so familiar. I'm not trying to disrupt your life, Elena, he said. I just don't want to disappear from it again without saying what matters. I looked at him carefully. And what matters? You always did. I just didn't know how to show it back then. The honesty caught me off guard. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He didn't lean closer. Didn't ask for more. He just sat beside me quietly, his presence saying more than any apology ever could. When he dropped me home that afternoon, he didn't walk me to my door. Didn't linger. Just said, "Thank you for today." "Thank you for asking," I replied. That night, I stood at my window, looking out at the street lit dimly by street lamps. I thought about all the versions of us that had existed, the hopeful newlyweds, the frustrated partners, the strangers in a courtroom, and now this, whatever this was. I wasn't sure where it was leading. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to find out. A week passed before I saw Marcus again. Not because we didn't want to, but because we both recognized we needed space to process what was happening. We still exchanged messages most evenings, simple check-ins, no demands, no pressure. But something had undeniably shifted. Not in the dramatic way people expect. This wasn't some fairy tale second chance. There were no grand declarations, no promises to erase the past. It was something quieter, more mature, and in its own way, more meaningful. One evening, as I sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine and pepper at my feet, Marcus texted, "Mind if I stop by for a bit?" I stared at my screen. It was the first time he'd asked to come over since everything. Sure, just for a little while. 15 minutes later, his car pulled up. I didn't rush to fix my appearance or straighten anything. I just stayed where I was, watching the first stars emerge through the branches of the neighbor's tree. He walked around to the balcony entrance, pausing at the edge. "Still the best view around," he said with a gentle smile. I gestured to the chair beside me. He sat down, not too close, not too distant. Just there. We sat in comfortable silence, both sipping wine from glasses that didn't match. The kind of silence that used to suffocate us now felt like a shared understanding. I drove past the restaurant where we celebrated our anniversary, he said eventually. "The one with the dim lighting and that terrible seafood special?" I laughed. "Oh my God, that salmon was awful," he grinned. "But you made some joke about it. Called it regret fish or something." I laughed so hard I almost choked. "I remember you wore that bright blue shirt I always said clashed with everything." He looked at me with that expression again, the one that said he was truly seeing me, not looking past me. "I've been thinking," he said, "about who we were then, who you are now, who I am now. I turned slightly toward him. I think we loved each other deeply, he continued. But we didn't always know how to live together, I nodded. We were good at the dreaming phase, just not the maintaining part, not the staying, he agreed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photograph, edges worn, colors slightly faded. It showed us years ago, standing in front of the old cabin we'd rented in the mountains. My hair was windswept. His arm was around me. We were both laughing at something. I found this last week, he said, handing it to me. Almost threw it away. I held it carefully, staring at those younger versions of ourselves. Bittersweet, like looking at people you loved but can never be again. Why didn't you? I asked. Because it still means something. Not as hope for the future necessarily, but as proof that what we had was real. That we weren't just a mistake. I looked at him. We weren't. He leaned back. I don't want to rewrite history, Elena. I don't want to pretend we're those same people. We're not. But I do want something with you. What kind of something? I asked gently. These conversations. Knowing I can call you and hear your voice. Sitting on your balcony talking about terrible salmon and looking at stars. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't even a request. It was an offering. I looked up at the sky again, stars sharper now in the darkness. The air was cool but comfortable. I pulled my sweater closer and let his words settle. I thought about all the people I knew, friends, colleagues, even strangers, who carried regret like heavy luggage they couldn't set down but never used. I had done that too, for a long time. But maybe there was another way. Maybe not every ending had to be permanent. Maybe some stories just turned to new chapters. I'd like that too, I said softly. Whatever this is, I'd like to keep it. He didn't respond immediately, just reached over and gently squeezed my hand. We sat like that for another hour. No labels, no plans for the future. Just two people who'd weathered the storm and somehow found a clearing. When he stood to leave, he kissed my forehead. Not romantically, not as a promise. Just a gesture. A thank you. As he walked down the steps, I called out, "Marcus?" He turned. "Yeah?" "Next time, bring something sweet. Something actually good this time," he grinned. "You got it." Then he disappeared into the night. Like a familiar melody you don't realize you've been humming until it fades. I sat back down, photograph still in my hand, and smiled. I still don't know exactly why I answered that first call, but I'm grateful I did.